Hey, this is Ron, and welcome to Bush Stories. Bush Stories is going to be brought to you by StandingWolfArchery.com. We make everything by hand using materials that only support other American and Canadian small businesses. So if you're looking for amazing, handmade, traditional archery gear, go check out StandingWolfArchery.com after the podcast. But in the meantime, our guest today has two of the most insane traditional bow hunting stories you're going to hear. He comes from Michigan State. He's a hunter. He's a trapper. He's a really great guy. You're going to love him. Without further ado, I'd love to welcome Jim Eeckhout to Bush Stories. Jim, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Ron. I appreciate it.
And for those watching on YouTube, you get to see Jim's awesome room, trophy room. And for those who happen to listen to the podcast, unfortunately, you're missing out. It looks badass and it looks awesome. So, well, Jim, right off the bat, I mean, how long have you been bow hunting? And I guess if you could just give us the insight, like when did you start getting into hunting? What led you to getting into traditional? And just like, what's the backstory? How did you find your way into this?
Okay, well, the backstory kind of goes that it started with my dad. So my dad was a hunter, a traditional bow hunter always. Nice. And so were his friends. So I just kind of grew up around it. We grew up on a farm, not like a mile from where I live right now. And had a bow in my hand since I've been about 5 years old. So I've always shot traditional, and I could just go out the door and hunt. And it's just kind of what I did. My dad kind of let me have free reign, so to speak, when I wasn't working on the farm, and I would just go take off and go hunting and trapping. And that's kind of, I learned all that, my woodsmanship that way. So. Right.
Now, did you have your dad actually kind of just show you some of his tips and tricks, or some of his buddies, or was it just more or less self-taught, go figure it out? And
a little of both. More probably a lot of self-taught. My dad was basically just he would deer hunt and bear hunt, and he would small game hunt, but he never took it to the level like I did. And he would do a few hunts out west or something as he got older. But growing up, I just took it to a whole nother level. I was just in the woods nonstop as much as I could be. So at what age did you actually start to take some bigger game? Like how did you progress? Like what did you start with? Like how did you feel like the next level was happening? In Michigan, we couldn't legally hunt big game until you're 12 years old with archery equipment.
Right.
So I had been running around with an older bear. It's like a longbow, a wood longbow that was built back in the 50s. That's what I was using. And when I was like 11, we were fortunate enough to have the bear archery right here in Grayling.
Yeah, of course.
So we'd go to the museum all the time, kind of a family trip. And then when I was going to be able to be old enough to hunt that following year, that fall, we made a trip up there and bought my first real hunting bow right from the Bear Museum.
That's amazing.
So then I started hunting when I was 12 years old, for deer hunting, and trying to figure that all out, and I'd go up north with my dad and his friends. And that kind of was the very first year I went up bow hunting. Besides where I grew up on our farm, there was, if you've seen a deer, everybody talked about it. There wasn't a lot of deer at the time. There were deer, but not a lot. No turkeys at all at the time. So we would go north of our home, probably like 3 hours north, and hunt in northern Michigan. Okay. A friend of my dad's property. And the very first year we went up there, and I was 12 years old, it's one of those deals. We drive up there for the weekend, and first morning we're going out, it's pitch dark out. I'm 12 years old, and they're like, yeah, if you follow this road, it follows all off to your right, goes down into a cedar swamp. So just go find a place to hunt and you'll figure it out. So they kind of just, I think my dad kind of knew at that point I'd figure it out, even at that age, you know what I mean? He kind of knew who I was. So, yeah, that's really how it went. I just kept in. Actually, the very first time I was out, I had an encounter with a buck. I sat down on the stream in the middle of this swamp, and I had this little 4-point come and cross the stream right in front of me. And here's, I'm 12 years old, sitting on a cracked off pine tree on the stump of part of it. And he crossed right in front of me, like at 15 yards. And, you can't, so it's all coming together perfect, but you're shaking uncontrollably. You're a kid. And I just flat out missed him, and, but what an experience, it was just like it happened last night. I can still remember everything, so.
That's amazing.
And, but then I just started hunting more and more and more. That really lit the fire as well. And then I'd always like to read a lot. I'd always read like the Fred Bear Field Notes or anything like that, or books by Russell Annabelle about adventures in Alaska. And then, like I said, going to the Fred Bear Museum, we'd be able to watch the films.
Yep.
And I'd see all the mounts and that. So that all that reading and seeing all that kind of lit the fire to do adventures in other places as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really cool. You're lucky to have, a guy willing to say, hey, just go in the bush and just come back with something, or just come back.
Yeah. And, my dad traveled a lot for work, so he wasn't always at the farm. Sometimes he'd be gone for a month at a time. So I kind of had to run that whole deal. So then I was just kind of doing my own thing anyway. So
right.
Get done what I had to get done, and then spend the rest of the time in the woods if I could, So
yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I've seen on your Instagram, you do some trapping, beaver. I'm not sure if it's specifically beaver trapping. I use a ton of beaver pelts with what I do, and I got a great appreciation for the people that do it. Like, how'd you get involved in trapping and just wanting to try that out?
Well, that was another thing about reading about it, reading about it when I was younger, and that was something I can do. And then I just started trapping when I was young around the farm, because we had livestock or chickens and stuff. So we may have like nuisance coons or stuff like that. So then I just started trapping, and it led from there. And I don't really I still trap, but mostly I just target either coyotes. Right now, I don't really mess with anything else but the coyotes or the beavers more towards spring.
Right.
And I really enjoy trapping beavers. It's a lot of work, but as but it's pretty rewarding when it all comes together,
Oh yeah. Some of the pics you showed, some of them are pretty huge. Got some big ones.
Yeah, I get some good ones. So, but mostly like for the coyotes, I just snare them anymore. I do some leg holds. It just depends where I'm doing it at. A lot of people, obviously the farms, a lot of people have, their farm dogs and stuff run all over. So I got to kind of watch how I do it all. Yeah. So I kind of avoid the leg holds for that reason. And in Michigan here, we have to use the dog proof or deer proof snares. Okay. They have the stop on them. So if a domestic dog gets caught in it, it's not going to kill it, or a deer, it's not going to kill them. They're a breakaway. So, but so I guess what the trapping is, I always tell people that like between the trapping and becoming a good squirrel hunter, because I love squirrel hunting, that I learned so much woodsmanship that way, and learned really how to deer hunt through squirrel hunting. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but they're eating the same thing at certain times of the year. And I'd learn how to hunt them, and then I'd always be seeing deer. And as the deer population, grew and grew and grew to what it is today, it all came together that way,
So there you go, guys. If you see squirrel, you're on the right track.
Yeah, I know it. And I've told other people this just recently. And the one guy goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "Just go and we find the right acorn, the white oaks, and the squirrels are feeding there. The deer are going to be there. There's certain trees that the squirrels target and the deer are going to target more so than other ones. It's kind of takes just a little bit of leg work, and you can figure it out, So I've always used that. So
that's great insight.
Yeah.
Well, as I said in the intro too, you're a member of the Compton Traditional. I'd just love to kind of get into that a little bit. You've had an article printed in the Archive second edition. Now, what got you actually involved in Compton, and what keeps you wanting to be a part of the organization?
Well, I've been a member of Compton for, I don't even know how many years now. I remember when they were formed, and then when they had the rendezvous here in Michigan, I ended up started to attend that. And it's just a great organization. It just does so much for the traditional archery community. It's really family oriented. It gets the whole entire family involved. a lot of kids get involved. And the rendezvous was 2 weekends ago. And I think for kids under 18, I couldn't even tell you, but I know that on Saturday when they had the youth shoot, there was probably 75 to 100 kids there.
Wow.
That participated in that. And a lot of little kids. And it's just, they have a riot, so and Compton just continually just keeps giving back to the community. It's just a great organization, and they're fighting to protect hunters' rights. I'm the past president of Michigan Traditional Bowhunters.
Yeah.
And we always worked hand in hand with Compton, and we kind of followed their lead with stuff. And they just do a lot. Compton also supports all the state organizations, and they're always there to help everyone. I don't know, just a great organization to be a member of.
Yeah, that's great. Especially, one thing I always kind of wonder, maybe ask people too, is like, where do you see archery going? And obviously it has to be with the next generation coming up, people that are also like in their early adulthood too, but the next generation, like you said, 100 kids or up to 100 kids, that's great. And if you times that by however many states or provinces or worldwide kind of thing, I mean, that's how you kind of keep it going. And being around mentors and, experts, and maybe people looking at some of you guys like celebrities, because you're in these publications. I mean, it's such a great thing to be a kid around and to be around people like you guys. So,
well, that's the thing too. And as you know, the traditional archery community as a whole is very giving. No one treats anybody any different just because someone's may have the opportunity to go hunt something that the other person. No one treats anyone any different. We just all like to get together and have fun and just do what we like to do. And Compton's all about that. It's a great organization.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, well, it's I really think, like you said, there needs to be more emphasis on these type of things, more support for hunters' rights. I mean, especially no matter what tool you use, especially in this day and age, things are changing so rapidly that that type of lifestyle seems to be wanting to be pushed away. So I think to have an organization or organizations that fight for it, that want to push it, is essential.
Yeah, definitely. They're definitely there. They have a legislative branch now that they'll work with other states. Like take Michigan Traditional Bowhunters, for instance. We opened a new position on our board for a legislative liaison who would go to Lansing on different issues that pertain to the archery seasons here in Michigan.
Right. So
that legislative liaison would report directly now and work hand in hand with the one from Compton. So we kind of work, they know what's going on in Michigan. And then if there's an issue, now we're getting national support from a national organization helping support an issue in Michigan. And Compton does that for other states as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's really good.
Just more unification, right? I mean, if it's just more.
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, because we're all striving for the same thing to, either to protect what we have or increase opportunity days of field. That's a lot of people don't understand about archery that aren't archery hunters is it was created to give sportsmen and women extra days of field with minimal impact on the resource. So with a lot of advancements in technology, you're seeing a greater increase of harvest. So more impact on the resource. And that's really not what archery was designed to do.
Right.
That's kind of not, so that's where sometimes the archery seasons get a negative impact, but us as traditional bow hunters, we have a lower impact sometimes, or trying to preserve what they were originally created for.
For sure.
So if that makes sense. Not that I care about what anybody, I don't care what you hunt with, as long as you're going out and enjoying yourself. But yeah, I'm just kind of giving a history point there that's what archery seasons were created for. So.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, just because you're going in with a stick bow doesn't mean you're walking out with an animal.
Right. Right. Exactly.
That's awesome. Well, kind of good, staying on topic with like what you've done and your contributions with writing. I mean, you've submitted a lot of articles and to a lot of, the top publications in Trad. And one of the things I really want to kind of ask is because we're all about bush stories, but we want to get into the stories now. It really caught my eye. And that was the the winter edition for I think it was the Alaskan Bowhunters magazine.
Okay, yeah. Was it the winter or spring edition? Is that the one you're talking about?
Winter spring edition, but the one we were carrying out the caribou. I think it was the last edition. And that was the what was it called? The redemption hunt story. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're open to talking about it. If you want to fill anyone who hasn't read the story, but I would love to hear more about that.
Well, I called that the redemption hunt story because in 2019, Brian Burkhardt and myself, we did the tribute hunt. And that was paying tribute to Fred Bear and Glenn St. Charles and everyone who went on the Little Delta hunt back in 1959. So that in 2019, that was the 60th anniversary of that hunt. So Brian and I had went to Alaska to hunt, do the same thing they did. We used all original as much as possible 1959 gear.
Cool.
And it was an incredible hunt. Brian shot a really nice moose. I had multiple opportunities. I just couldn't get, I missed a beautiful bull. I had multiple opportunities of giant bulls in range. There was too much brush or the wrong angle and this, that, and the other thing. So it never happened. So then in 2020, we went back to the same area. And I believe it was probably 4 or 5 days in, I had already multiple stalks on bulls again. And same deal. I just couldn't close the deal, but I was into moose and it was good. So it was, I think, the 5th or 6th day of the season, like I say, or while we were hunting. At midday, we usually head back to camp, meet back at camp. We hunt separate. We camp in the same spot, but we solo hunt basically out of that.
Yeah.
So we always try to meet back around midday and maybe have lunch or get firewood and do stuff like that. So that particular day, kind of looked at my watch and I don't know what time it was. Probably we tried to head back at noon. It was probably around 11 o'clock. And I'm up on a ridge on the side of a mountain and I'm glassing across the valley and I caught up on the top of the mountains across from me, good couple miles away. I thought I saw a flash of white up towards the peak of the mountains. And I grabbed my binoculars real quick and I was looking and I lost it in the timber. And I thought, well, maybe it could have been anything, hawk, whatever. But so I sat there for about another hour and didn't see anything. I decided to make my way back to camp and I'm paralleling this mountainside and I'm breaking off these, they're burned out black spruce and none of them are very big around, probably twice the size of a broom handle. And they're probably 8 to 10 feet tall. Well, we usually break a bunch of those off, carry them back to camp and then cut them up into firewood. Fire had burned through there, I don't know how many years ago. So it's perfect firewood. So as I was making my way across this mountainside, I just keep glassing the valley down below me every so often. And I was breaking this one off. I laid my bow down. I'm breaking this one dead spruce off and I kind of like spun it around in a circle. And as I did, I looked down in the valley in this gravel bar where I had just stalked a moose like 2 hours earlier. And I seen a flash of like white or gray down there. And I grabbed my binoculars right away. I got first thought I thought was a grizzly bear because basically where I was doing that 2 days prior, I'd walked right up on a grizzly bear, like 16 steps away. We surprised each other. It just got done raining. And I kind of yelled at him and ran at him to scare him because, it was one of those deals. I startled him. He startled me, but I was going to act like, I was bigger and badder than him and it worked. Thank God. And he went the other way. Just did a big, like woofed at me and took off. So I thought it was the same bear possibly used in the valley, whatever. And then as it came out of the willows on the gravel bar in the bottom, it was a bull caribou. And I was like, wow. I go, holy mackerel, that was a caribou. I go, wait, that's probably what I seen up on the side of the mountain, making his way down through the timber. And I was kind of shocked because the pilot that we use to where we hunt is a previous biologist in the area. And he had told us before we went in to not worry about purchasing caribou tags because the caribou had migrated through there 4 or 5 weeks before.
Right.
And they're migrating to the east into Canada from where we hunt. So we wouldn't see any caribou. So that's fine. We still have, every year we still get the harvest ticket for caribou because we can use our moose tag on caribou.
Oh, cool.
Just in case we see one, or if we know the caribou are in the area, we'll purchase a caribou tag. So anyway, I looked at it. I go, well, that's a pretty nice bull. And so I picked up my bow and kind of forgot about the firewood right then. And I started paralleling the bull as he was working the valley about a half mile, 3/4 mile below me. I just started paralleling with him along the mountainside, more or less just, I wanted to get back to camp to let Brian know, hey, there's a caribou in the valley. Kind of cool to see it. Not really, you can't catch caribou. If you ever hunted caribou, you're not catching them. You're not running ahead of them, cutting them off. You're just not doing it. So my thing was, if I can get to camp quick enough, maybe I could see this thing in the valley and show Brian. So as I started going, I got into some black spruce on the mountainside, and there's a couple old caribou trails coming through there. And I could still kind of see down there. I go, boy, it'd be cool if he just would turn and come right across the river and come up one of these trails. And right as I thought that, he did. He hung a 90 and he started coming. And I said, wow, this might work. But I knew I was going to lose sight of him. So he turned that 90 and he's coming right at me. So I kind of positioned myself in these spruce trees, and they're like stunted spruce that are dotted on the mountainside. So you can kind of see through them, but you can't, if that makes sense. Yeah, so I kind of positioned myself in between these two trails. So one trail was maybe 20 yards to my right. And the other one was like 15, 18 yards to my left. So as he's coming, because of the angle and the curvature of the side of the mountain, I lose track of him. I can't see him. So I'm just, okay, where did he go? So I stood there forever. It seemed like maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and I'm waiting. I'm like, well, I'm going to give this another 10 or 15 minutes. And he probably, for all I know, he could have turned the other way and kept heading to the east or whatever. I didn't know at that point. And it was probably 2 or 3 minutes later, I caught movement to my left coming up through the spruce that was the top of his rack. And he was coming to my left on the trails to my left, which would bring him about 16 yards from me, maybe. So I had spruce trees right in front of me. So I just kind of got ready, and it's like being a right-handed shooter, the caribou on my left, it couldn't have been any perfect, And he just come walking by at like 16 yards, and I just came to full draw, and I blew the arrow right through him, and he spun and ran back down the mountain. And I said, well, that looked like I shot him right through the heart. It looked like a perfect shot. So I just marked the spot where I was standing, and I just made my way back to camp, and then I got to camp, and Brian's like, what took you so long? And I said, I lost the arrow. And he's like, you lost the arrow? How'd you lose the arrow? I go, a caribou ran away with it. And he's like, what? So we were laughing. He goes, what happened? So I told him the whole story. And he's like, no way. He says, a big bull? I go, yeah, it's a nice bull. I'm happy with it, So he goes, well, let's go get it. And I said, no, let's eat lunch and just relax, get everything together. And so that's what we did. We just ate lunch, and we always have like what we call as a kill kit. So it's a small pack, and it'll have our tags in it, our knives, game bags, maybe some paracord, cut-proof glove. It has everything in one kit. So we grabbed that in the pack frames, hiked back up the side of the mountain to where I was standing. I stood in that spot. Brian kind of walked over to where I told him the caribou was, and I walked to that spot, started looking, and I found my whole arrow except the fletching was missing. We don't know what happened to that because it had went through the arrow or the caribou. So then, we just did kind of like the stand at last blood and went, and because of the curvature, I couldn't see. Brian got ahead of me, and I stood. Then he went to the next blood, and then all of a sudden he goes, well, there's your caribou right there. And he didn't go very far at all. And I'd shot him right through the heart. So yeah, it was really cool. And then so we got him all quartered out and butchered out, and we packed him down to the river, because this is literally where I had shot him, was within 40 or 50 yards where I had encountered the grizzly 2 days prior. Yeah. So I packed him down to the river. Then we have a spot across the river where the runway is that we hang all the meat. So Brian goes, well, I'm going to go put the electric fence up. So we went over there. We put he started to put it up. While he's hooking it up, I packed all the meat back to the meat pole, and we got it all hung up. And then, so that, we were all said and done. It didn't take us very long to, processing a caribou was pretty quick. And so Brian got to hunt that evening, and then it was like probably couple hours later, I seen more caribou going through the valley, but they were going the opposite way, like they were coming back from Canada.
Huh.
And then for the next 2 days, the valleys and the mountainside were something like you'd see on a TV program from National Geographic. Just thousands of caribou migrating through. And I'd experienced that many times hunting the mulchatna herd in Alaska many years ago, but I hadn't in a long time experienced it like that. And Brian, he just was into caribou like crazy. He was just waiting for nothing but a giant to put his moose tag on. And unfortunately, he never did get one, but he had multiple opportunities. And I just got to sit back and because my tag was filled at that point, just watch the whole show. So, so that's how that hunt all came together with that caribou. It was pretty cool.
Just the shoot, you got the lone guy who's the scout, I guess.
Yeah, because at first we thought, wow, that's a straggler. He's behind the herd by a couple of weeks, but they still scent trail or whatever. And I don't know why he was heading that way or where he came from, but the herd was actually coming back that way. So it's pretty cool to see that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. Wow.
Yeah. So that's how that came together. And then, then the Alaska Bowhunters. It was a traditional bowhunter magazine as well, the article. And then the Alaska Bowhunters wanted to run it. And that's how that ended up.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm sure if you guys, whoever's listening to this or watching it, circle back, read the story. I'm sure you might have a little bit more detail, but hearing it come out of your mouth, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Well, staying on the topic of stories, I was going to actually ask about Big Cat, but you know what? Let's let you freestyle it. That's pretty epic. The caribou one's pretty amazing. But is there anything that really just was the apex of your hunting experience? Like, what was the one that you said, wow, that was just the most insane adventure, or just the most incredible animal that you harvested, or what really is the one that you would say that was it? That was the one.
Maybe you could say just the one animal that I would have to probably say my mountain goat hunt. And I know I've talked about it before on other podcasts, but honestly, that to do, as a solo mountain goat hunt on my own, that was pretty cool to do that.
Well, the good news is you haven't talked about it on this podcast.
Correct. This is true. All right. So on that mountain goat hunt, obviously people know that mountain goats are notoriously hard to hunt, even with a rifle, given their eyesight and the terrain that they inhabit. So I had been trying to go on a mountain goat hunt for close to 20 years. I had originally had a hunt planned in Alaska, and they enacted the guide requirement. I had booked the hunt like 2 years in advance, and it was a flying deal, and I was going to get dropped off. Right after I did that, they enacted the guide requirement for mountain goats.
Okay.
So I had to hire a guide. And at the time, it was like, I want to say it was $3,500 the guide wanted to charge me. And there's just no way I could afford that. It was just way too much money at the time, It's still a lot of money to me today. But anyway, so what I did at that point is I started putting in for different out-of-state mountain goat tags where I wouldn't need a guide. And I had acquired a lot of points in Montana. So what happened is Montana has a deal that every 3 years or every other year, you can apply without losing your points. So I had drawn a moose tag in Vermont, and then I drew a moose tag in New Hampshire. So I just I skipped those 2 years or I drew another tag. I forget what tags I drew. Maybe it was a bear tag here. But anyway, I skipped like 2 years because it's every 3 years. So then when I got my application to put in for the Montana thing, it said 0 points. So I called Fish Game. I go, why do I have 0 points? It's every 3 years. She goes, well, that's every other year. I go, I understand that. I missed 2 years in a row. She's like, no, you can't. You can only miss one. Whatever way, I lost all my points to Montana. So I was kind of upset about that. So then a buddy of mine said, you should just put in for Utah because so-and-so drew a tag on his first try in Utah. I'm like, what? I go, I put in for Utah, but for, desert bighorn or bighorn. And he's like, no, put in for the mountain goat. This is just try it. So I did. And on my third year applying for the mountain goat tag in Utah, I drew the tag.
Oh, that's perfect. That's amazing.
So I was pretty stoked about that. I couldn't believe it, and I called my buddy. He's like, I've been putting in for like 10 years for that unit. I still haven't drawn it. So I said, I don't know what to tell you. But anyway, so I drew that hunt. So then I had to start doing my research. So I went on to the bow site on the internet, which I'd never used before. And I just kind of put a feeler out that I had drawn that tag. And then I went on another site on the internet. It was called Monster Muleys. And I did the same thing because they had a forum in there for hunting mountain goat and sheep and stuff. So I just put that I had drawn that tag if anybody had any information. Well, there was a guy right away reached out to me, and I even put it right in there. I'm a traditional bow hunter. I don't want to hire an outfitter. I'm going to do this on my own. And there's a guy who got a hold of me right away. And he just bent over backwards to help me. So I live right by the unit. I spend all my spare time in the unit. He said, I'm not a traditional bow hunter, but I helped a traditional bow hunter from Missouri kill a goat there a few years ago, and I'll get you in touch with him and you guys can compare notes. So that's what he did. He even went up into the unit the one time hiking and made me a video. He sent me the video.
Wow.
And I got my topographical maps, and he kind of told me spots where he had been seeing goats and stuff like that. So I kind of had everything lined out where I knew I was probably going to hunt, but like anything, it could change,
Yeah.
So I took the entire season off work, and I drove all the way out to Utah, 2,700 miles or whatever, 2,300 miles one way. So I got in. I wanted to get to my base camp and get set up at least 3 days, 2.5, 3 days before season, just to scout and get acclimated and everything. So I did that. And I was all set up like 2.5 days before season, and I grabbed my video camera and my camera and stuff, and I hiked up into the mountains, and within an hour I found goats. And I just kind of sat there for the rest of the evening, glassing them and watching them. And there were 3 big billies in the group, a lot of nannies, a lot of kids. And I just kind of watched them all that evening until almost dark, and I hiked back to camp. Well, then in the morning I was right back there, and I was with that same group of goats. So that second day, I spent the entire day with that group of goats. At times I was like easy bow range to some of the goats. And I didn't want to spook them out of there, and I didn't want that to intentionally happen the way it did, but it just did. So I got and watched how they moved throughout the day and their feeding patterns, and how they'd follow the sun off one side of the mountain to the other, where they would bed and everything. And I spent the entire day with them. That evening, I hiked back out. The next day, the day before opening day, I did the same thing. And they basically followed the exact same pattern, where they were crossing in the saddles in the mountains, going from one side to the other to feed. And I just kept shooting video and photographs and video, and kind of had it figured out. And I'm not a trophy hunter. At the time, I didn't know anything about mountain goat scores or any of that stuff. I just knew there was 3 billies in that group, and one of them was bigger than the other 2, body wise anyway. So I met a couple guys, other guys that were back in there that were going to be hunting. They were hunting a different area. And as I was walking out the night before season opened, I ran into a guy, and he's like, we started making small talk, and he said, where are you going to hunt tomorrow? And I told him, and he kind of said, there's no goats up in there. He goes, you need to go over here, here, here. And I go, well, where are you going? He goes, well, I'm going over there. I go, well, I don't want to go where you're going. I said, I'm just going to go up there. I said, look, I'm just here to enjoy myself. I said, I'm a bow hunter anyway. He goes, you're bow hunting them? He goes, what kind of bow are you shooting? A Matthews or something like that, or a Hoyt? And I said, no, I'm shooting a recurve. And he's like, what? he's like, it's not going to happen. I'm telling you right now. Plus, where you're going, there's no goats. I said, well, all I can do is try. He goes, well, you can shoot anything. The only thing I've seen where you're talking about going up in that pass is nannies and kids. And I'm like, okay. He goes, well, good luck, whatever. But I'd take a gun if I were you, and whatever. I said, yeah, good luck to you. And I went back, and then obviously opening morning, I started hiking up into the mountains before daylight. And I picked a spot out where I figured I could ambush the goats in this little low spot on the peak of the mountain. They would cross through there, and there was like a rock outcropping with these stunted pines growing on it. So it was almost like I was in a tree stand. And it was like a 10 or 12 foot circle of these rocks with these pines around it. And so I could just kind of stand there, and it was very steep going down the one side, but the other side, I was just below the peak of the mountain. So when they would cross over there, they would come right past me, you know, and like I say, it was like I was in a tree stand almost. It was perfect. So as I started making my way across the mountain face to where I wanted to try to ambush these goats opening morning, I had my bow in my left hand, and I went to go around this rock face, and it was kind of a narrow ledge, and I banged my bow into this. I don't know how I did that. I hit it so hard, I broke the quiver off my bow.
Huh.
So I was like, crap. So I had to get around that, and the quiver's barely hanging on. I had to get around that, took my pack off and everything. Then I had to improvise, take what was left of, you know, get the quiver off the bow, and I just put it into my pack. And then by the time I did that, I didn't want to spook any goats. I kind of had to wait for a little bit of daylight. It was getting lighter. Well, I didn't go much further, and all of a sudden, here comes some goats towards me. It was just a nanny with a couple of kids, and I kind of like stood up against the mountain face, and they literally fed right by me. I could have touched one of the kids with my bow tip. That's how close it came past me. So they fed past me, and it was just getting daylight. So then I got to the rock outcropping where I wanted to be, and it was, you know, just getting so you could see even better. And I just got settled in and getting all situated, and got my quiver laid out in front of me and everything, got my binoculars ready. Now it's getting light, and I hear a rifle shot, and it's close. And I was like, I mean, it startled me. It was so close, but you know, it's quiet. It's in the mountains. It's, you know, first thing in the morning. I was like, holy mackerel. I mean, where'd this guy come from? I didn't know anybody's even back in here where I'm at. So right away, my mind starts thinking all these things. Boy, I hope he didn't shoot one of those goats, or that's the only season open in there right now. So it was like 5 minutes after that rifle shot, the direction from the rifle shot, which was out in front of me, I see these goats come running up through this pass. And I was like, dang. And then right away I recognized there was one nanny that had a broken horn. She was really big. She was with the group. Well, I go, darn, that's a group that I was been hanging with the last couple of days. They for some reason the night before I don't know, they moved that much in the dark, but apparently they did. They were back on this side of the mountain that I was on. Completely opposite of what I thought would happen. They would feed past me. But anyway, the whole group came past me, or started coming towards me, and then they started feeding. And I noticed in the back of the group, there were the two billies, but the bigger one I had spotted in previous days was no longer with them. So then I figured it out. I said, well, or at least in my mind, I'm like, well, that great big goat was probably what this rifle hunter had shot.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they had came from maybe a half mile away or so, or maybe further the rifle shot. I don't know. But anyway, so the goats started feeding closer and closer to me, and they were coming right up this mountain face by me. And some of them were feeding right below me, like 10 or 12 yards, nannies and kids, and the billies were out a little bit further. And they all of a sudden, they kind of like, the goats all like locked up, kind of were looking down very intently down the side of the mountain. So I kind of looked, and way at the bottom, before it went over a steep cliff, like a sheer drop off, there's like a trail for pack horses and mules and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, I could see something moving down there. I put my binoculars on, and there was a hiker down there, a guy with a backpack on hiking. And they were watching him, and it was like 1,000 yards below, you know, at least. So he's hiking through, and then the goats kind of, when he disappeared, the goats relaxed and went back to feeding. And like I said, I had either sex tag, so I could have shot whatever. And I had some pretty nice nannies like at 10 yards. But I said, well, I'm just going to, hopefully one of these billies will get closer to me, you know. And they started to get a little bit closer. And then all of a sudden, the goats all look back down the hill again. As I'm looking down the hill, this hiker is going back the other way. And I thought, well, all right, whatever. So now, more goats had joined. So now I've got, I don't know if it was 12 or 13 goats all feeding around me, anywhere from 10 yards to 40 yards around me, including 2 billies. So the billies start getting a little bit closer to me, and they're starting to, they're in bow range now. They're under 20 yards, and one's giving me a good shot. And in my mind, I keep thinking, darn, I know that big one's already shot. Stop being picky. You waited this long you have a legal goat in front of you. It's a billy. Stop worrying about, just try to execute a shot. Well, then the goats all pick their heads up again, are looking. I look back down, and the guy's going the other way. And I go, this hiker must be lost, and I'm just kind of laughing to myself. But it's getting the goats to pause or do whatever. So as this third time we're watching, the goats all of a sudden, obviously can hear better than I can, all whip their heads and look up at me. And I'm thinking they're catching my scent. Well, right then I hear rocks falling behind me, and up over the hill comes another goat. And it's that great big billy.
Oh my God, that's perfect.
He comes over the hill, the mountain, the peak of the mountain to my left, up above me, like 20, 30 yards. And he comes right down below me. And the other 2 billies run up to him, and they started having a shoving match, like a 3-way shoving match. And they're chasing each other, and they're like, it's just, they're going to fight or do whatever they're going to do. And the one billy kind of ran off, and the bigger of the other 2 stayed with that great big one. And the next thing, I got that big one standing right below me, facing me at like 10 yards, but he's facing me. And I can look right down into his back. And I don't know, they spin around, they're pushing and shoving. The other goats start feeding past, and then he runs that big billy. The big billy runs the smaller billy down a half circle in front of me, and he's gonna like run him down the mountain. And I'm like, I'm gonna miss my opportunity, kind of thing. I didn't know what to do. So all I did was I just yelled, "Hey!" And they stopped, and they all looked at me, and they were about between 25 and 30 yards broadside, perfect. And it's just like shooting out of a tree stand right down the side of the mountain. I just drew back and I shot, and I hit him, and the arrow came out of the base of his neck on the exit. And as he spun to run, I could see that I probably hit the artery on the exit too. And the blood was just going everywhere. And he started running straight away, and his knees started to buckle in that, and he went down because I didn't want him. There was a chute there, and I didn't want him to fall down that chute.
Yeah, for sure.
So he fell right like 10 yards from it. He went down to his knees, kind of buckled, and he fell. Well, out of my peripheral vision, I see another goat running up to him, which was the other billy. And he was confused, and he ran the billy that I just shot in the rear end. And the billy that I just shot's basically dying, tries to get to his feet and turn around. And as he turns, he kind of falls, gives up the ghost, and his hindquarters fall over that chute, and he falls over the edge.
Oh God, no.
And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh no. Because I knew from the previous days scouting out through there how steep it was.
Yeah.
And how bad it was. And just like a big giant boulders, rocks, rock faces. And I knew he fell into that, but how far could he fall? Hopefully not far, I'm thinking. So I kind of gathered my wits about me, and I turned on I have an old cell phone, like a flip phone that I use for everything. I don't have a regular cell phone, but anyway, I turned it on just to see what time it was. And it was like hour and 45 minutes into opening day. I'd already filled my tag after waiting all those years. And while I was doing that, I looked down and I had almost full service. All the bars on my phone. So I called my dad. And my dad had a bout with cancer, and he couldn't shoot his recurve because he lost upper body strength. So he gave me his recurve, and I took it on the hunt and didn't tell him I was going to use his bow for the hunt. So I called his dad. He's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I just shot." He goes, "You're supposed to be mountain goat hunting." I go, "I just shot a mountain goat." He's like, "What?" I said, "Dad, I just shot a mountain goat. It's opening morning. I just shot a mountain goat with your bow." He's like, "No way." I said, "Yeah, I brought your bow, your recurve. I brought it with me, and I shot this mountain goat." He goes, is he dead? I go, he's dead. I go, but he's fell into a chute. I'm going to have to get him out of it, but he's dead. It was a good shot, and he's like, no way. I said, yeah. So I'm going to get after this. I'll just call you whenever I get service again, which I don't know. I'll be up here in the mountains for a couple of days doing whatever. So anyway, gathered my pack and everything. And I went over to the edge, and obviously where he had laid, there was just blood everywhere. And then I looked over the edge, and in the rocks, there was blood all over. So I had to start climbing my way down through the rocks. And as I was climbing through the rocks, I didn't go very far. I found the back half of the arrow, probably the back 8 or 10 inches of the arrow with the fletching, covered in blood, because it was like, that was probably all that was left in to go. It was almost a complete pass through.
Yeah.
So as I'm picking my way through this, there's just blood everywhere. I'm like, I can't believe he went this far. And it'd be one big giant boulder and some, rock, scree, and gravel, and then it'd be more and more. And I probably got about halfway, and then I could see out into this big basin off to my left. I could see an orange vest sitting almost on the mountain peak. So I looked at my binoculars, and I looked down from the orange vest. I see 2 guys working on a mountain goat. So what I could see was there was the rifle. A guy had this rifle laying next to him with the orange vest. Down below him, about 30 yards, were 2 guys working. I'm like, wow, that must have been like a guided hunter or something. Or I don't know why the guy's not, but at that point, I didn't care. So I kept working my way down a little bit more. And all of a sudden I heard someone yell, "It's down here."
What?
And I thought, did I just hear someone yell? Then I heard it again, and I'm looking, and I can only hear out of my right ear, basically, so I can't tell direction very well. And all of a sudden I look down the mountain to where it's that hiker guy at the bottom. He's waving his arms above his head going, "It's down here." And he's yelling. So I'm like, oh my God, it went all the way like 1,000 yards down the mountain.
Oh.
Through these boulders are huge. I mean, giant. Some of them are almost as big as a small car, but it's super, super steep. So he had tumbled and bounced and tumbled all through that. So mountain goats have very brittle horns. So I know that when I get down there, there's going to be nothing left of this mountain goat. That's my mind, right? So I pick my way down to him, and I'm just coming over there's like a big giant boulder that's like the size of a minivan. I kind of step up on that, and the goat, you can see where the goat had launched off that down to where his feet was. So I still can't see it. And he goes, "It's right here." And I'm like, "All right, thanks." I go, "Is there anything left of it? Or how bad is it?" And he goes, "It's pretty dirty." I go, "All right, what about the horns?" He said, "No, the horns are fine," which I couldn't believe. I just couldn't believe it. So as I climbed down off that, came around, and the goat's laying there dead. And this guy's kind of looking at me, and I'm trying not to say too much because, he's a hiker. And I don't know how his perspective on hunting is and how he feels. So, and literally where the goat fell dead, if he would have went another 20 feet, he would have went over a cliff face that I would have never got him. There would have been no way to get him. And so anyway, I couldn't believe it. This guy's looking at me, he goes, "You scared the crap out of me." I said, "I did." I said, "How's that?" He goes, "Well, I'm hiking through here. I hear all these rocks falling. I look up, this mountain goat's tumbling down the chute. I don't hear a gunshot. And this mountain goat falls over, and he kind of comes right on the trail in front of me. I kind of like stopped it. And it was one of those other guys up on the side there were kind of like, where did this mountain goat come from? And then all of a sudden you show up on the top of the mountain 10 minutes later. And he goes, "You shot it with that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh my God." He goes, "That's awesome." So then I knew he was an all right guy. He's all right with hunting. So he goes, "Who are you hunting with?" And I said, "I'm here by myself." He's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just by myself." He goes, "Okay." He goes, "You need help with anything?" And I'm like, "Nope, I'm all set." He goes, "Well, that's a heck of an accomplishment." He says, "Well, I'm going to get going." He goes, "I got places to be today." And I said, "Okay." So he goes, "You need help with anything?" I said, "Nope, I'm all set." So he turns and goes back the way he came from. I'm like, what's this guy doing back here? So
You're kidding. No.
yeah. So I'm kind of looking at this goat and I can't believe it. So I just I sit down next to him on this rocks and I take out my pack and I get my license, my tag out, and I start filling it all out. And I'm doing all that. And as I get that all done, I hear noise to my right and I kind of look, and this guy's walking back towards me on this trail. he says, hey, I started walking away. He goes, I feel bad just leaving here. You're here by yourself. You sure you don't need help doing anything? And I said, well, would you mind taking some pictures for me? That'd be great if you could do that. He goes, absolutely. And then he said, it's nice to see you're doing everything by the book. And he introduced himself and he was fishing game.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yep. He goes, do you have any idea what you've just accomplished? I said, yeah, I can't believe I killed a mountain goat with my bow. I go, this is just awesome. And he's like, no. He goes, do you know how big this mountain goat is? And I said, yeah, look, I go, I don't know what it weighs, but he goes, no, the horns. He goes, this is like a record book mountain goat. I go, is it really? He goes, you're serious? You have no idea. I go, look, I don't care if it's a record book or not. All I know is I wanted to kill a mountain goat with my bow, and I did it. And I don't care if it's in the record book or anything. I've never acknowledged the record. I don't have a problem with them. I just don't care about it, So after introductions and talking, he kept on and on. And, he said, you're the other out-of-state hunter. And I said, what do you mean the other out? There's only one non-resident tag. He's like, well, there's an auction tag, governor's permit. That's that guy up there that shot that one. And I said, what? He goes, yeah, that guy's bought the governor's tag. He's from New Jersey. He goes, he shot it from down here on this trail all the way up on the side of the mountain with some crazy expensive rifle. And he doesn't want anything to do with the goat. And he hired these outfitters, and they're up there cleaning it. So I seen, I was wondering why he wasn't sitting with them or anything. He goes, yeah, it's just like a prestige thing. He didn't really care about it,
Oh, that's pretty lame.
Yeah. So anyway, we kept talking, and I told him, he asked where I was camped at. And I told him, and then I asked him about like want and waste laws in Utah, because Alaska is very stringent. You got to take all the meat out before anything. He said, you can take whatever you want. He goes, don't leave that hide and them horns back here. Take those back to camp first, with whatever meat you can. He goes, I've got my partner further back in here. I'm going to meet him later this afternoon. When we come out, any meat you don't have packed out, just stash it up here on these rocks. And he said, we'll pack it back to your camp for you. I go, oh, you guys don't have to do that. He goes, no, we don't mind doing it at all. He goes, plus my buddy's going to want to see your goat anyway once I tell him about it. So I said, okay. So, just super great guys, So I got to start skinning the goat out for a life size. I got all the meat all quartered out and everything. A thunder shower came through. Luckily, I carry a small tarp with me. I covered everything in that. Lightning and thunder came through the mountains just briefly. Anyway, and I got that all done. And then got my pack all loaded with the hide and everything in one of the quarters. Grabbed my bow and all that. Had all the other quarters in the game bags laid out in the rocks in the shade. And I started making my way back towards my camp. And as I got partway down that trail, I see a guy coming with a rifle. And it was the guy from the night before that told me I wouldn't.
Of course, it had to have been. Of course, it was. Yeah, that's too funny.
It was like, he's like, "Oh my God, you got a goat on your back." I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "You shot it with that?" I go, "Yeah." Well, then he goes, "Let me look at you." He goes, "Holy mackerel! I can't believe that thing." He goes, "Congratulations!" So he's like, he just kind of mumbled something and wandered off, So I went back to camp, dropped that off. I ate something, rehydrated. Stripped down to what I just needed, bare minimum to try to get as much in the next trip, because I was a couple miles from camp where my base camp was. So went back, and as I was loading up my pack, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do all this, because goats aren't very small. I didn't bone the meat. I was leaving the bone in. Here come that fish and game officer with his partner around the corner. And he goes, "Is there anything you want us to help you or not?" I go, "Well, I was wondering if you guys can take both hindquarters." Just joking around with them. They're like, "Sure, we will." I go, "No, just I got this stuff loaded. There's just going to be like a front and one incidental bag of trim meat." They said, "We'll take that back to your camp. We'll meet you back there later. We're going to go a different way." But anyway, so they brought the meat back to camp later, and we hung out at my camp for a while. And this partner looked at it, and they just he was in awe too. And I said, "I don't really understand." They go, "This is probably a Boone and Crockett mountain goat you shot with a recurve bow. You have to put this in the record book." I said, "Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to do that." And they, "No, please do it, because it'll give recognition for the state of Utah. And, and for you shooting it with a traditional, and the way they were really cool about it. So I agreed to. I see how, you know what, when they put it to me that way, I thought, all right, I'll do it because it's about the goat, not about me. And I'll have it, I'll get it scored and see. And it did. It made Boone and Crockett. So, not only Pope and Young, but Boone and Crockett. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Congratulations.
So, yeah, thanks. So that, and to do it, like that on your own, so not many people get to do unless you live in a state or a province with mountain goats. You really don't get to do a solo mountain goat hunt.
Just the whole story, Jim, sounds like picture perfect. Like using your dad's bow, like everything about it was amazing.
Yeah,
just incredible.
Yeah. It was, like I say, I had the whole entire season off, and I was done the very first day. So, not that I'm complaining, but it was just, it just all came together, and a lot of it, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I think I got lucky and got into the goats, was able to stay with them and do that preseason scouting for a few days prior. Plus the guy from the bow site that had kind of got me lined out in the right direction, at least in the general vicinity where he had seen goats earlier in the summer. So it all came together. So
yeah, no kidding. Wow. It was like, perfect. Incredible story. Love it.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Wow. Now, is that the guy behind you?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. So
amazing.
Yep.
How are the bones after? I guess they're pretty much pulverized, huh?
What's that?
How are the bones, like the skeletal structure on him afterwards?
All of that was fine, but his face was kind of broken up and scarred up from banging, and that rock is really like dusty and shale and stuff like that. So he went from if you see the pictures I have of him right up to the day before season, just gorgeous white. When he was at the bottom there, he was a mess. He was dirty, nasty, all beat up. His nose was split open. Buddy of mine, that's the taxidermist that did it. He said that he come in on a Saturday on his own with the shop closed because he goes, I had to do basic plastic surgery to reconstruct everything on his face because it was so broke up, But there was a minimal chip on the horns, which was crazy. But other than that, they were intact. So
it looks like he did a great job. I mean, that's a fantastic.
Yeah. He did a really good job on it. So,
wow, that's amazing, Jim.
Yeah.
Well, that's me. I don't even know what to even ask out of that. That was just epic. Epic.
Yeah, it was. That was. Like I say, just I like hunting with people, but most of my hunts I always do solo. Even when Brian and I hunt in Alaska. Like I said, we camp together, but we hunt on our own. But if someone gets an animal done, then we're done hunting. We help the other guy, obviously.
Yeah.
But normally I try to hunt on my own for everything.
Yeah, that's a way to do it, especially when you got the wealth of experience like you have too. Anyway, so it's what to do. You know the right steps, and there's not too much that you would have to be trying to figure it out on the fly. So,
right.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, one thing to kind of wind it down, one thing I would love to ask, you do have the experience. You've been hunting and shooting a bow, like you said, since you're a kid. Would there be anything that you would look back on and say, if I had to do it again, teach myself everything that I've learned, would there be anything you'd want to coach yourself on to do things differently or improve upon, or shortcuts that you would say, hey, this would help get you to where I am now, maybe a little bit better, or you'd fine tune your own approach?
I don't know if that there's anything I'd really change. One thing being that where I live geographically, we're challenged because we're east of the Mississippi River. So we've only got limited what we can hunt. We're hunting bears and we're hunting deer, basically. That's for big game. I wish that when I was younger, I go to Alaska a lot on DIY hunts. I wish I would have spent more time going out west, maybe hunting elk and mule deer and stuff. Not that I haven't done that type of stuff when I was younger, taking advantage of it. But to change anything I've done, no, I think it's all good the way I did it. Just to learn, school of hard knocks type thing. Because you learn every time you go into the woods. I always am learning. You're always learning. Yeah. So I think. I don't think there's anything really I would change. Pretty, I'm not into all this bow tuning and all this like a lot of people get into. I probably could be a little bit better. I know I could be better at that. People always comment, they look at my quiver, none of the arrows match. They're all different lengths. I see them, they all shoot the same. So I don't get hung up on that I don't think about that. I try not to think about the technical side too much.
Yeah.
I just try to shoot the heaviest arrow I can accurately and not worry about it, So,
yeah, that's great. So if you were to give a kid who was about to go get his first deer, what would you tell him?
first year deer hunting or just first hunting?
Whatever, it doesn't really matter. What kind of advice would you suggest?
I would say to try to find a good mentor and learn woodsmanship skills, and don't expect success overnight, and work for it, and you'll appreciate it more down the road, but definitely find a good mentor if you can, for a kid. And there's enough people out there that are willing to do that, and don't, I don't know. I see so many people get hung up on antler size or stuff like that. I personally don't. If it's legal and you're hunting legal, I don't care what you shoot. And you shouldn't care about what everybody else. Everybody's a so-called expert. Shoot what makes you happy and just enjoy yourself. Have fun. Because that's what it's about.
Right.
So,
that makes sense.
Yep.
Oh, I love it.
Yep.
Jim, thank you so much for everything, sharing everything you just did. And, before we sign off, where can people find you online, or what would you want people to go look for?
I've got an Instagram account. It's just Jim Eeckhout on Instagram or on Facebook. That's basically it. That's all I have. So, yeah, they can just find me at, like I say, Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Jim, you're the best, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, well, thanks for having me on. I had a great time.
Oh, that's awesome. Me too. I really appreciate everything. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Take care.
All right. You too.